The morning my son was supposed to get married, I was hiding in the trunk of a stranger's car. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not because I need you to feel sorry for me, but because even now, 2 years later, when I say it out loud, it still sounds like something that happens to someone else. Not to me. Not to Irene Calloway, 63 years old, retired dental hygienist from Barrie, Ontario, who volunteers at the food bank on Thursdays and always brings butter tarts to the church potluck. And yet, there I was, knees pulled to my chest, a wool blanket that smelled like motor oil and dog hair thrown over me, the trunk lid clicking shut above my head in the dark. Mrs. Calloway, please don't make a sound. I'm begging you, you need to see this yourself. You need to. That was Felix Okafor, who had been driving for our family since my late husband Harold bought his first decent car in 1998. Felix, who taught my son Connor how to tie a proper Windsor knot. Felix, who drove me to Harold's funeral and sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes afterward because I couldn't stop crying and couldn't go home to an empty house. Felix had never once raised his voice to me, so when he did that morning, low and urgent, hands on my shoulders, steering me toward the back of his car like I was a child who'd wandered into traffic. I didn't fight him. I didn't understand. But I didn't understand. But I didn't fight him. I just folded myself into that trunk and I waited. I should back up. Connor is my youngest. 34 years old, software developer, lives in a condo in Waterloo. He has his father's jaw and his father's stubbornness, and God help me, his father's complete inability to hear me when I'm telling him something he doesn't want to hear. He met Simone at a conference in Vancouver. She was a consultant, she told him. Financial planning. She had an apartment in Toronto, a sister in Calgary, a mother in Portugal. She was 40, never married, no children. She laughed at his jokes. She made him feel like the most interesting man in any room. I wanted to like her. I genuinely tried. But there was something I couldn't name for the longest time. When she looked at me, it was like she was calculating. Like I was a variable in an equation she was already solving. She'd ask questions about the house Harold left me, about my pension, about whether Connor was the sole beneficiary. And then she'd smile and say she was just curious. She loved family history. I mentioned it to Connor once, just once. He said, "Mom, not everyone is suspicious. Some people are just interested in the people they love." And then he didn't call me for 3 weeks. I learned to keep my mouth shut after that. I smiled at Simone at Christmas. I drove to Waterloo in February with a casserole and a birthday card. I watched her open the sapphire earrings Connor had bought her and say they were beautiful while looking at her phone. When he called to tell me they were engaged, I said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you." I hung up and I sat at my kitchen table in Barrie and I cried. Not happy tears, the other kind. Harold, I thought. Harold, I need you to tell me I'm wrong about her. He didn't answer. He never does. But I think he would have agreed with me. The wedding was planned for a Saturday in September. Niagara-on-the-Lake. Simone had chosen everything. The venue, the florist, the caterer, the guest list that mysteriously kept shrinking on her side while growing on Connor's. She told Connor early on that her family was complicated and that she preferred a smaller celebration. I thought, what 34-year-old woman with a sister and a mother and a whole life has no one to invite to her wedding? I said nothing. Felix picked me up that morning at 7. I was wearing the blue dress I bought in April, the one Connor's aunt had helped me choose because I couldn't trust my own judgment anymore. I second-guessed everything when it came to this wedding. I had a small gift bag in my lap, a card I'd rewritten 4 times. Felix didn't say much when I got in. He wasn't playing the radio, which was unusual. Felix always played the radio. CBC Radio 2, usually. That morning, the car was silent. "Felix, are you all right?" "Yes, Mrs. Calloway." A pause. "I need to make a quick stop before we get on the QEW. I apologize." I assumed he meant gas. I looked out the window. He didn't stop at a gas station. He turned off into a residential neighborhood in Oakville. Quiet streets, mature trees just starting to go orange and red at the tips. He pulled into a cul-de-sac and parked behind a row of hedges and turned the car off. "Felix, what is this?" He turned around, and the look on his face, I had never seen Felix look like that. He was frightened, genuinely frightened. "Mrs. Calloway, I need to tell you something and I need you to listen to the whole thing before you say anything. Please, you're scaring me." "I know, I'm sorry. Please listen." He had a cousin, he told me, Delia. She lived in Mississauga and worked at a private family law firm downtown. 2 weeks ago, Delia had called him. She'd been going through archived case files, routine work. She'd been doing it for years, and she had come across a file, a divorce file. The name on it was Simone Beauchamp, except the address listed was right here in Oakville. And the divorce had been finalized 14 months ago, and the reason it caught Delia's eye was not the name or the address. It was the child. There was a daughter, 8 years old. Her name was Lily. And Lily was living with her father here in Oakville because the court had determined that her mother, Simone, was not a fit primary caregiver due to a pattern of financial deception during the marriage. I didn't breathe for a long time. "There's more?" Felix said quietly. He reached into his jacket and handed me a folded piece of paper. Printed pages, small font, a record from the Ontario Securities Commission. Simone Beauchamp, the same address, the same date of birth, had been flagged 2 years ago for unlicensed financial advising. She had solicited investments from 4 clients, collected over $180,000, and the funds had been moved through a numbered company that was later dissolved. 2 of those clients had filed formal complaints. The matter had been referred for investigation. The investigation was still open. My hands were shaking. The pages were shaking. I made myself read every word. "Does Connor know any of this?" "No, Mrs. Calloway. I found out 3 days ago. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know if I should. I went back and forth." He pressed his hands together over the steering wheel. "But I couldn't let you walk into that church without knowing. I couldn't. I sat there in that quiet Oakville street for what felt like a very long time. The September light was coming through the trees. Someone's lawn sprinkler was running. Everything looked perfectly ordinary. Why didn't you tell me at my house? Why here?" Felix hesitated. "Because I needed to show you something else, and I needed you to see it yourself." That's when he asked me to get in the trunk. I won't pretend I wasn't terrified. I am 63 years old. I have a bad right knee, and I hadn't been in a dark enclosed space since I got stuck in an elevator at the hospital in 2019 and had a panic attack that I still don't entirely like to talk about. But I thought about Connor. I thought about Harold. I thought about the sapphire earrings and the shrinking guest list and the open investigation sitting in a file at the OSC. I got in the trunk. Felix drove 2 streets over and parked along a tree-lined boulevard. Through the crack where the trunk lid didn't quite seal, it was an old car, a 9 Camry. Harold had always said Felix should replace it. I could see a strip of the house across the street. Blue shutters. A child's bicycle on the porch. A man came out first. Late 30s, well-dressed, carrying a little girl in a pink dress. And then Simone walked out behind them. She was in a different dress than her wedding gown. Something casual, cream-colored, like she'd just come from brunch. She put her hand on the man's arm. He leaned down and she said something and they both laughed. He handed her the little girl. The little girl put her arms around Simone's neck like it was the most natural thing in the world. Because it was. That was her mother. Simone kissed the top of the little girl's head. Then she handed her back, said something else, and got into a car I'd never seen before. A rental, I thought. She didn't want Connor to recognize the plates. She drove away. The little girl waved from the porch until the car was out of sight. I lay in that trunk, and I didn't make a sound. But I was crying. I couldn't help it. Not because of what Simone was, because of what that little girl had just done. Waved goodbye to her mother. On the morning her mother was marrying someone else, in a city that wasn't their city. while her father stood there holding her. That little girl had no idea what day it was. Felix let me out 2 minutes later. He handed me a tissue without saying anything. I fixed my dress. I fixed my face as best I could. How far to the venue? I asked. 45 minutes with traffic. Okay. I got back in the passenger seat. Okay. Drive. I had 45 minutes to decide what to do. I thought about Connor saying, "Not everyone is suspicious," and not calling me for 3 weeks. I thought about every time I'd bitten my tongue at Christmas dinner. I thought about what would happen in 2 years, 5 years, when the savings Harold left him were gone, when Connor couldn't understand where it went, when he found out the woman he loved had done this before and would do it again because she had never once faced a real consequence. I thought about what I'd want my mother to do if she were still alive, if she'd known. I thought about that little girl on the porch. I called my son. He answered on the second ring. "Mom, are you close? The photos are starting at Connor. I need you to meet me outside before anything starts. Just you. 5 minutes." A pause. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need 5 minutes with you. Alone. Before you go in." Another pause. Longer. "Is this about Simone?" "I love you more than anything in this world," I said. "And because I love you, I need 5 minutes." He came out. He was in his suit. Dark charcoal, the tie I'd helped him pick out in July. He looked so much like Harold walking toward me that I had to look away for a second. He looked happy. Or he had looked happy before I called. Now he looked braced, like a man waiting for a blow he knew was coming. "Mom, sit with me for a minute." There was a bench near the parking area away from the entrance. I sat down. He sat beside me. I gave him the papers Felix had printed. I didn't say a word. I just gave them to him and let him read. He read for a long time. Then he said, "This could be a different Simone Beauchamp." "Connor. There are probably, Connor." I put my hand over his. "Look at the address. Look at the date of birth." He looked. He sat very still. "The little girl's name is Lily," I said. "She's 8. I saw her this morning." I took a breath. She waved goodbye to her mother. Connor didn't move. His jaw was tight. The papers were completely still in his hands because he had stopped breathing the way you stop breathing when your body needs a moment to catch up to what your mind already knows. "I'm not asking you to cancel anything," I said, even though that was exactly what I was asking. "I'm not asking you to make a scene. I'm asking you to have a conversation with her, a real one, right now, before you walk through those doors and give her a chance to tell you the truth herself." She would have told me, would she? If she had a daughter? Connor. My voice was gentle. "I promise it was gentle. I promise it was gentle. She had a daughter and a marriage and a financial fraud investigation, and she told you none of it. That's not forgetting, that's choosing." I watched him. I watched the moment it landed. It didn't look like anger at first. It looked like grief. His face crumbled in a way I hadn't seen since he was 7 years old, and our dog didn't come home. He stood up. He walked toward the entrance. Then he stopped. "You should have told me sooner," he said, without turning around. "I know. I meant that. I truly meant it. I only found out this morning. And I should have said something months ago when I had nothing but a feeling. That's on me. I'm sorry." He stood there for another moment. Then he went inside. I don't know exactly what was said. I wasn't there for it. I sat on that bench and I looked at the garden and I listened to the sound of a string quartet that someone had hired and that was now playing to an increasingly confused set of guests who had expected a wedding to start 20 minutes ago. A woman came outside, mid-50s, severe haircut, wearing the look of someone who organized events for a living and did not appreciate surprises. She clocked me immediately as a person with information and walked straight toward me. "Are you Connor's mother?" "I am." "He's asked for 15 more minutes. Is there anything I should tell the guests?" "Tell them the ceremony is running slightly behind schedule," I said. "That happens at every wedding." She looked at me for a moment. Then she went back inside. I called Felix. He was parked down the road. I told him to stay where he was. 23 minutes later, Connor came back out. He sat down beside me on the bench. His tie was loose. He had clearly been crying, which broke something in me even though I had known this was coming. Had known it the whole drive down from Barrie. She admitted it, he said. I waited. The daughter. The marriage. She said the OSC thing was a misunderstanding, that it's being resolved. A pause. I don't believe her about the OSC thing. No. She said she didn't tell me about Lily because she was afraid I'd leave. I looked at my hands. Turns out she was right, he said, quietly, not with satisfaction, just as a statement of fact. We sat there for a while, my son and me, on a bench outside a venue in Niagara-on-the-Lake that had cost more than his first car. The string quartet had stopped. Through the windows I could see movement, guests standing, turning to each other, uncertain. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing right now. He pulled at the knot of his tie. I need to go back in and tell people there isn't going to be a wedding. Do you want me to come with you? He thought about it. No, I think I need to do it myself. He looked at me. His eyes were red. I'm glad you told me. I'm glad Felix told me. He almost smiled. Almost. I'll call Felix later. He's going to get an earful. He'll survive it. Connor stood up. He straightened his jacket. He looked at the door for a moment, the way you look at something hard before you walk toward it. Dad would have done the same thing, he said. Told me, I mean. Found a way to tell me. I didn't trust my voice right then, so I just nodded. He went back inside. I've thought about Simone a lot since that day. More than you'd expect, maybe. Not with hatred. I got past that somewhere around last February after enough Thursday mornings at the food bank, after enough conversations with my pastor about what it does to a person to hold on to that kind of anger. I think about what it takes to build a whole life out of emissions. To sit across from your daughter on a morning like that and hug her and then drive to a church to marry a man who doesn't know she exists. I think about the version of Simone that got desperate enough to do that. I think about the version that is genuinely capable of love. Because you don't wave goodbye to a child like that. You don't kiss the top of her head like that without something real underneath it. But love is not a defense. And children deserve better than to be someone's kept secret. There was no prosecution in the end. The OSC investigation concluded with a settlement and a conditional ban on advising. I don't know where Simone is now. Connor doesn't ask and I don't look. What I know is that Lily is still in Oakville with her father and that her father sends Connor a very brief email every 6 months or so just to say she's doing well. Connor doesn't know why he does that. I think I do. I think that man knows that my son was almost Lily's stepfather and that he came closer to that little girl than he ever knew and that he made a decision on a bench in September that protected her too, even without meaning to. Connor is doing well. He's back in Waterloo, threw himself into work for about 8 months, then started going to a hiking group that his colleague had recommended. He called me last spring from the top of a trail in Algonquin Park, out of breath and laughing about the black flies, and I thought, there he is. There's my boy. He doesn't talk about Simone. That's fine. Some things don't need to be talked about. Some things just need to be survived. What I will say, and I mean this for anyone listening, anyone who has a feeling about someone and can't name it, anyone who has bitten their tongue at Christmas dinner because they didn't want to be the difficult one, trust the feeling. Name it or don't name it, but trust it. I have been wrong about a lot of things in 63 years. I was wrong about the housing market in 2008. I was wrong about low-fat yogurt being a reasonable substitute for actual food. I was wrong about bangs in 1987. Deeply wrong. We don't need to discuss it. But I was not wrong about Simone. And my son came back to me. That's the part I want you to remember. Through the awkward silences and the 3 weeks of not calling and the moment on that bench when he said, "You should have told me sooner," which was true and fair and which I have made my peace with. Through all of that, he came back. He always comes back. That's the thing about your children. No matter how far they go, no matter how stubbornly they believe the wrong person over you, they come back. You just have to be there when they do. You have to still be standing. I am still standing. Harold, I think you would have gotten a kick out of the trunk. I wish you could have seen it. I wish I could tell you this story in person, sitting at the kitchen table in Barrie with a cup of tea, the way we used to debrief every hard thing. I'd tell you about Felix's face and the smell of that blanket and the way Connor straightened his jacket before he went back inside, and you'd shake your head, and then you'd laugh, and that would be enough. That would be more than enough. I've spent a lot of time thinking about what would have happened if Felix had stayed quiet, if he had decided it wasn't his place. If he had driven me to Niagara-on-the-Lake in silence, turned on CBC Radio 2, and kept his cousin Delia's Discovery folded in his jacket pocket where it wouldn't cause trouble. I would have walked into that venue in my blue dress. I would have sat in the front row. I would have watched my son marry a woman who had a daughter she'd never mentioned, a marriage she'd never disclosed, and a fraud investigation she buried under a new name and a new city and a very convincing smile. And then what? I think about that a lot. Not with anger anymore. The anger burned itself out a long time ago, but with a kind of sober clarity that only comes when enough time has passed. The actions Simone took didn't happen in a vacuum. Every choice she made, hiding Lily, dissolving that numbered company, presenting herself as someone with no complicated history, those choices had a direction. They were aimed somewhere. And the longer a person travels in that direction, the harder the landing when the road runs out. That's not a punishment handed down by anything outside of us. It's just physics. It's just how things work. Connor is the one I think about most when I sit with this. He made choices too. He chose for a long time not to look too closely. Not because he was foolish. My son is not a foolish man, but because looking closely felt like a betrayal of the person he loved. I understand that. I've done it myself. We all have moments where we mistake willful blindness for loyalty. But here's what I know now, at 63, that I wish I had known at 34. Real love does not ask you to stop asking questions. It doesn't flinch when you look at it straight on. Whatever is true and good in a person, in a relationship, in a life, that truth holds up under examination. It doesn't need protecting from your own scrutiny. Connor learned that. Not easily. Not without grief. He sat on a bench in a suit he'd bought for his wedding and he cried, and that was real and it was hard and he survived it. That survival was not an accident. It came from something in him, some stubbornness, some fundamental belief that he deserved the truth even when the truth cost him something. That's what I call character. Not the absence of difficulty, but the decision to face it anyway. What I want anyone to take from this, if you're a parent biting your tongue right now, or a person who has a feeling they can't name, or someone who has been looking the other way because looking straight ahead seems too costly, is this: the discomfort of knowing is almost always smaller than the cost of not knowing. Almost always. Say the hard thing early. Name the feeling, even clumsily. You don't need a folder of printed evidence and a family driver with a loyal cousin. You just need to trust yourself enough to speak. I didn't do that perfectly. I waited too long, swallowed too much, apologized to my son for something I shouldn't have apologized for. That's my part in the story and I own it. But I got back up. So did Connor. That matters more than getting it right the first time.